routine as we play the characters that you cheer. So join us as we go below the frame.
Welcome to Below the Frame. I'm Matt Vogel, and today we are talking with two directors who have worked with the Muppets over the years. One of them has worked with the Muppets on Sesame Street, and the other has worked with the Muppets on the TV series The Muppets. I'm saying Muppets a lot. And the Muppets Mayhem. Both of these directors I respect and admire greatly. And after you listen to this, I think that you're going to see why. So here they are now, Matt Sohn and Ken Diego. Welcome to Below the Frame. How are you, gentlemen? Ken, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Just dealing with our heat dome in the East Coast here.
Yes, it's a hot time here in the summertime in the East Coast. Yeah, Matt, how are you doing?
About the same, though, boy. We're dealing with the heat out in LA as well. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well,
not fun. It's everywhere.
Thank you for talking with me today. You both worked on series that I have had the pleasure of working on. I've worked with you both for years, and I wanted to talk to you both about directing Muppets, because there are a lot of tools that you need to have in your belt to work with Muppets, and hopefully we'll get to some of those different skills that you need. But first, Ken, would you just mind telling us a little bit about you and your career, what you did before working with Muppets, and then kind of how'd you start on Sesame Street?
So let's see. I started out as an intern and then a PA at Channel 13 at public television. And by a stroke of great fortune, I had my school did not recognize internships at the time. They only recognized theoretical research in media. And I was really disappointed. I accelerated my coursework, and I got to a point where I only needed 3 credits to graduate in my last semester. And then my school, for some reason, swapped advisors. So I ended up with a totally new advisor for the last semester of my graduating year. And he said to me, well, have you taken this course that I'm teaching? I said, I don't really need it. And he said, good, sign up for it. You don't ever have to show up. Go out into the world and do what you want to do as far as internships go.
Wow.
And I will give you credit for this. Just check in with me every couple of weeks. And so that led to me being a full-time intern at Channel 13. I remember sitting down with the intern coordinator, and she said, we really need you to devote 1 full day a week to us. And I said, well, I could do 6 days a week. Plus I have a car. Plus my great hobby is photography, and I process my own film and I print and da-da-da. And they're like, so when can you start? So that led to me working pretty much full-time on a number of great productions at Channel 13. And it was always their fundraising season, which is the first part of the year. And that's when the most funding goes to the best programs, because they're fundraising programs.
Right.
And then that led to a career as a PA. And then I was in the first, I worked on the first incarnation of Nickelodeon. And they've had numerous incarnations. I was on the launch team for MTV. How's that for dating myself? And then I somehow got into news, which I hated. And then I bounced out of news back into the entertainment area. And in the mid-'80s, I ended up on working for Children's Television Workshop on Square One TV, a math show. And it was a phenomenal gig. It was so much fun. And it was 8 months long productions. And then I got passed around at CTW. I got past the 3-2-1 Contact and then passed to Sesame Street. And that's kind of how I started there. So sorry for the long story, but
No. Ken, I have a quick question because I don't know. Is Channel 13, is this all New York? Is everything?
Yes. PBS.
Okay.
It's the flagship PBS station in New York. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry,
but
I'm not enough to know that.
That's totally fine. And also, Ken, you've worked on other things other than Sesame Street over the years.
Yes.
What are some other stuff that you've worked on?
I just completed associate director work on the Tony Awards. This is my 13th Tony Awards.
So super easy, just really light.
For some light recreation. I've been an AD, a primary AD on a number of live award and variety shows. I had done the Oscars until this year. Mm-hmm. They switched teams, but I had done 8 years of Oscars. Kennedy Center Honors, they switched teams, but I did 10 of those.
Wow.
Thanksgiving Parade for CBS, not the NBC version. Right. And CBS just pulled the plug. I did it for 31 years.
Wow.
They just pulled the plug. I'm shocked.
Oh my gosh.
They just pulled the plug on that. And then other live telecasts. I've worked on a music series for Arts and Entertainment, Live by Request, it used to be called. We did over several years. I think I've worked on about 20 of them. It's just a lot of fun. They're big adrenaline rush, and that's my associate director career. But for a while I was directing Bill Moyer's Journal for PBS. Other less intense programming for television. Yeah.
Matt, similar kind of question. What are some things that you worked on before Muppets? How did it come to pass that you were asked to direct on the 2015 series and then later Muppets Mayhem? Tell us your journey, sir.
So I also sort of my journey took off with an internship as well. By fluke. I went to college outside of Pittsburgh, small college, Washington and Jefferson College in Washington, Pennsylvania. And I was hoping to be a veterinarian. That was my big plan. And I kind of took a hard right somewhere. I had a friend that got an internship at a radio station. I was like, that's cool. So I applied to all the stations in Pittsburgh, the TV stations, and managed to land an internship at the NBC affiliate. And that was my first introduction to the television world. I had a dark room in my closet as well, and had enjoyed shooting stills, but this was my first introduction. So I too was in the news world, and ultimately there taught myself how to operate a camera, and was learning all the aspects of it because I didn't go to school for it. Ended up becoming a studio camera operator and a cameraman for some of their local productions in Pittsburgh at WPXI. And then moved to Salt Lake City. We started a newscast from the ground up for Fox News in the long ago, and we literally built the station from the ground up. I was ready for a change and had one friend that lived out in LA and moved out to LA and was working for CNN and got jobs at Access Hollywood and all of those shows as a cameraman. But at the same time, I was doing documentary work around. I did early versions of a lot of those reality shows, like the cops shows and LAPD Life on the Beat. Speaking of MTV, I was a cameraman on Road Rules way back whenever. That led me into the Eco Challenge adventure races because I liked the great outdoors, and the guy who did that was a guy named Mark Burnett that later did Survivor. So I did the early seasons of Survivor. And at the same time, I was doing some documentary work that would sort of bounce me around the world. And I got hooked up with guy named Bertram von Munster, who started The Amazing Race. So I was sort of bouncing back and forth from Survivor to The Amazing Race and doing all sorts of reality shows in between. And it was also a time where this was all new and there was a lot of work around and it kept me busy, and I was on the road 10 months out of the year. But anytime that I was back in LA, I was starting to do more scripted stuff as a cameraman, as a DP, low budget features, and operating on shows. Ultimately, I got dengue fever in shooting Survivor Thailand, and it knocked me out of reality television, which is, sometimes when you do these adventures, you have to pay the price. And it gave me two wonderful things. One, the woman I was dating at the time that took care of me, I realized I needed to propose to her if she was going to stick with me during that. And the other thing was sort of got me away from reality television and kept me in town doing local scripted stuff, mostly comedies. And it was right around then that the TV show The Office came around. And the original DP of The Office, as you know, was Randall Einhorn, who is an old friend, and we were camera operators together on Survivor and on Eco Challenge. So when The Office came around, he was the camera operator. He needed somebody that knew the dance. So I came in, and Randall quickly shot up and out and was just directing and left. So I ultimately took over directing and operating on the show. But it was that show that Greg Daniels gave me my first opportunities to direct comedies. So I was directing there, and I was starting to get chances to go to other shows and direct, and whether it was Parks and Rec, back then it was The Mick and Blackish, The Goldbergs, New Girl, and so I stayed for the whole run of The Office. So I did all 9 seasons, and then when I left The Office, I stepped away from the camera side of things and have just been directing since then. And it was Randall Einhorn was the director, EP, I don't know what his title was, for the 2015 Muppet show, and that was my in there, and I ended up doing a number of those episodes, and then years later, I don't know if it was how many years ago, because I get lost with COVID.
Yes, I know. 2022, 2022.
I know it didn't air for a while.
That's
too.
right.
Yeah.
It aired last year.
I was very fortunate to get to work with you again on the Muppets Mayhem.
Yeah, and here we are.
And here we are.
We are now. Well, thank you both for that little like a little dossier on your on your careers. I kind of look to you both as mentors of mine. I'm a director on Sesame Street, and I've worked with Ken for a long time. Ken would be the AD for me, which was just a huge help, Ken, to have you there as that. And also with Matt, I've watched the way that you've directed your camera operators and how you've communicated, both of you, how you've communicated with your cast. So so I do see you kind of as mentors of mine. And I do have, sorry, fellas, but that's how I see it. If you were talking to somebody, another director who had never worked with Muppets before, whether it's Sesame Street or the Disney Muppets, and it's okay. You can be honest. If I don't like it, I'll just cut it out. What are the top things that you might tell them? The warnings, or the hey, look out for this, or here are some things. Matt, what about you? Let's go with you first.
Well, so it was interesting when we started out in 2015, because I felt like as a whole, a lot of the Muppets are very presentational, and you guys have your monitors that you work with, and you like to know and be able to work to all the cameras. And I think one of our fun challenges was we were doing something a little different in terms of single camera and trying to get sort of over the shoulders and shots where it feels more like I can't say more like, because all of them are television shows, but it's a style that it's okay to have the back of a puppet's head and get it over the shoulder of another puppet talking to that puppet. And I know that it felt like a challenge at times because the puppeteers because they're very aware of all the cameras and want to perform and sell the best angles. That ended up being one of the biggest challenges, was to get something to feel sort of still natural without being so presentational that as if they're just playing out to an audience.
Yes, that is true. And just so we can understand the difference here on the 2015 Muppets and on the 2022 Muppets Mayhem, those were essentially single camera shows. We would sometimes use 2 cameras, sometimes three.
Yes.
Maybe a very few times on the 2015 there may have been 4.
Well, and we had 4 cameras we just went on some of those big days with the concerts and stuff. We did throw in some extra cameras for the latest one as well. But the opposite on Sesame Street, there are 3 cameras and it is a live switching situation. So the performers there are seeing essentially a wide shot and 2 close-ups or two shots or whatever the director chooses it to be, and you're seeing it cut live. It's being edited as you go, so the performers can make very small, subtle little movements, which does happen if you watch really carefully. You'll see them make little movements that will help them adjust to the camera that they're seeing. That boom, camera cuts, they make a little bit of an adjustment. And so I think the trouble, or the challenge that Matt was talking about, is when you do these overs, sometimes you're playing your close-up camera, and so the puppet has to be positioned in a certain way, and on that over that same character's shoulder, it looks like they're kind of leaning a little too far, or if we can't see it, we can't help. So I mean, that was a challenge, and I feel like we all kind of took it head on, or over the shoulder, however you want to put it. And we did kind of manage to come up with a little bit of a language, a way to do it. But there was definitely a learning curve with it.
Oh yeah,
for all sides,
absolutely.
And just to state it, because it would take us 5 days to shoot one episode, which I think is very opposite. Ken, for you, how many are you guys doing in a day?
We do 1 episode a day, but it's I'm going to say 14 pages, maybe longer. And yeah, it's a challenge. You really have to pick your scenes that you're really going to plunge into, and then simplify other scenes that'll get you to those juicy scenes. Yeah,
that's true. And so, Ken, what are some things that you would tell a director if they
well, 2 main things. I'm going to borrow one from the title of your podcast.
Yeah, all right.
You better pay attention to what's going on below the frame. And number 2, borrow from Sesame curriculum, sharing. So number 1 would be, you can't block a scene unless you know how the puppeteers are going to achieve this. And that affects any movement you're going to have in the scene. It's going to affect your framing. It's going to affect how much, how many lines of dialogue or pages you can shoot before you hit something that will force you to cut and move your cameras and reorient the puppeteers so they can continue. So that's number 1. And that's a shocker for directors. That is a shocker, and you, Matt, you went from a lot of run and gun, lighting on the fly, shooting on the fly. Yep. I mean, this is kind of the antithesis of that,
Yeah.
And then the other thing, the sharing aspect is if you're going to use multiple cameras, you have to share your line cut. The puppeteers have to see the cut, and because that's how they can orient the puppet to give the best performance, to look the most realistic. Sesame is kind of I'm going to call it a 2.5 camera shoot because a lot of times that third angle is just too far off axis to be usable, and even if you cut it into the mix, it will force the puppeteer to either take a moment and reorient to say their line, or you should just get through the scene, go back and pick up that shot. So it's kind of a 2.5 camera shoot, but the sharing aspect of it, you have to show the angles, you have to share the angles, and you have to share the timing of those angles or when they're going to come up in the scene, and that's what the line cut's all about. So then that takes a number of sessions. It took me, I'm going to say, 2 years. Unfortunately, I started as an AD on Sesame. It took me 2 years to get my head around that. 2 seasons where we shot a lot. I mean, I was early on. Our seasons were August through February.
Yeah, they were 120 shows or something like that. It was
it was something crazy. But it was that reputation and seeing what's going on. It was such an inverse world that it really took me 2 years to get used to it. 2 seasons, I would say.
Now, Ken, I have a question for both you and Matt then about that, because we would have whether it was a quad split, a single monitor that had all the cameras on it, or multiple monitors. Do you also have for Sesame Street the live cut that you're seeing in one of your?
So every camera is recorded,
right?
And we do a live cut as close to the timing as we intend it to be, knowing that in the edit room we can move it, in either direction,
right?
Just to really refine it. Because we're going to be late or we're going to be early, and if the performers do something on the fly that you didn't expect, well, you're going to be late. But
which happens.
You're going to know that angle is there. So and the puppeteers at times, we can choose to give them all the angles at the same time, or just full screen the cut. So yeah,
and there will be times when. I was just going to say there will be times on Sesame where usually we just have one monitor and it just shows us the live cut. And before we go, we'll ask for references, and then they'll just cut around to the 3 cameras, and we'll know kind of like where they are. Especially if we're not if we're starting on a close up and then coming to the wide, we all kind of want to be in the right position. But sometimes we will have our line cut monitor, and right next to it we might have either the quad, just so that we can get an idea of where we're going to be going, or a shot that we know is like really difficult to get, and I got to get in the right position ahead of time. That happens a little more infrequently, but it does happen.
Yeah, because I know that was an interesting thing that we would run into, is that there were times where, because we had multiple cameras going, the puppeteers would say, well, this camera doesn't work for me. Though we would know sort of in our edit, we would use the other ones, but it was hard just, for the puppeteer, because they're still seeing all 3 cameras because the camera's holding their angles. Yeah. And I know that became, I'm sure, a frustrating moment that you couldn't, whether we'd have to just drop that camera out or lose it altogether just so it didn't, distract the puppeteer, performing.
Yeah, and what's different too between the 2 styles of shows is on the line cut show, it's rare that you're going to cut to a Muppet just kind of reacting and just kind of like listening or usually when you cut to that reaction, it's they have a line to say, they have something to say. But on another show like Muppets Mayhem or on any other single camera show, there are cuts to the other characters listening and reacting, for whatever reason, whether it's, we want to start on take 5 and then jump to take 7. And in between, we need a reaction shot of this character, or whatever that reason might be. So it is difficult for us to know when to play what camera. So a lot of times we say, like, we would assume if we were speaking, we're probably going to be on camera. And then maybe when the other character's speaking and we're in a 3-camera situation, we're seeing all 3 cameras, we'll just kind of react in that other camera and make that work. It's a little bit of a dance for us, but I think we've gotten okay at it.
Yeah. It's hard for because reaction shots. It's hard to put those into the line cut because the cutting gets in the way of the actor performing the scene. So then, especially I do a lot of work with Sesame Workshop and what we call outreach, or which are videos that have more emotional sensitivity. And in those scenes, you really want those reactions, but you can't get in the way of that. So invariably, more than likely, you're going to go to single camera so that the puppeteer is always playing the scene, whether they have lines or not. And then those are available to cut in. And sometimes we'll go 2 cameras, but not cut it, just put up a 2-camera window. But a lot of times on those overs that you describe, the angles are too extreme to make both look good. So you kind of have to abandon it and go with the single shot.
Clean.
And then turn the camera around and go the other way. Yeah, it's tricky. It depends on the sensitivity of the scene. I think for comedy, it might be harder because, you want to capture everything kind of in one.
Yeah. And
some magical things happen in one scene. And if you don't have 2 good angles, it gets tricky. It's hard to replay a comic scene. Oh, and sometimes hard to replay a very emotional scene too, and still have the same performance.
So. Yeah. And we'll talk about a little bit more about those social impact shows here in a little bit, I think. So working with Muppets, just as a concept, Matt, was that ever intimidating?
Well, I mean, of course it's intimidating because, again, we all have grown up with these characters, and to be fortunate enough to get to work with them and get to work with these performers that have been doing these characters for so long and know them better, than anybody else, of course. And it's also such a precious world that people have special feelings about. So you also want to handle that in the best, most professional way possible. But there is nothing more fun than being on the set with the Muppets. And there becomes that point in time where I forget, and I don't give a note to a puppeteer. I give a note to, a puppet, because that is who I'm focused on, and that is who I'm talking to. And that puppet sometimes never leaves character and talks back to me. And it's just an amazing experience.
Yeah. How about you, Ken? Ever intimidating working with the Muppets?
Oh, especially early on because of the history, Yeah. I mean, I have a scene with Frank Oz in it, and I'm like, I'm going to tell him what to do. I don't think so.
Yeah.
And these characters, they've been inside these characters, inhabiting these characters for decades. So you kind of want to just capture what they're about to do, and hope that, you have decent coverage and, you've captured what they pull. And a lot of times, they'll do something that's way off the page, but changes, just makes the scene so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember you brought up Frank, and I remember as a younger performer, him coming to set and being like, Frank Oz is here. Everybody be cool, man. Just be
Yeah.
cool. And I was mostly talking to myself. And then,
Right.
after some years of working with him, I found myself working opposite him when Jerry Nelson was not
Yeah.
healthy enough to be able to put his
Right.
arm above his head. And we would do a Grover and a Fat Blue scene together. But I am playing, not only am I in the scene with Frank Oz, but I'm also performing Jerry Nelson's puppet for him and lip syncing for him while he is doing the lines live. And yeah, so, and it's hard not to just kind of let yourself just spiral into this,
Exactly.
just panic. But humans are more intimidating, though, right? Working with human actors.
Well, here's the thing.
I don't know.
And this is they can be, but there's a certain, the human actor doesn't see their performance.
Mm-hmm.
You as a director are watching their performance and asking for adjustments and capturing things. And here you have another layer. Not only do you have an actor who's performing a character, and they're 15 years ahead of you in their character development on that.
Yeah.
But they have to be micro directing their puppet. So their preconception of what's going to happen in the scene is also, more developed than maybe a human actor at the onset of a scene. So there's a lot of sort of preconceptions going on, and then they evaluate their performance, and if they didn't like something they did, and you may not have picked up on the subtlety of it, they'll ask for another take. There's a lot of that going on. So there's another layer in there too.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, you've worked with human actors as well. What would you find, like, there were big differences of working with human actors versus Muppet performers?
I mean, there's always differences. It's funny because the puppeteers have to do so much for their character in their moment. And then you sometimes realize how easy the human actors have it.
Yeah.
But they can still be much more challenging than than the puppets. But yeah, I there is still, I don't know, I feel like a bigger level of sort of intimidation with the puppets still for me than any big star that I've worked with. And I'm not really sure why that is, and I hadn't really thought about it until this moment, thinking about it.
Is it because we're constantly looking at what you're shooting constantly in real time?
I think that definitely is part of it, and there is a level of, with an actor, it's going to be like, oh no, when you see the edit, it's going to be perfect. Because they're not seeing the different angles, and they're not seeing, they don't know necessarily the plan, where the puppeteers are definitely seeing all of the options. And maybe that becomes more frustrating as a puppeteer to watch that and to realize, maybe when things aren't going the best, that you're aware of it, where, sometimes things can get fixed in post that can surprise you. You're sort of always seeing behind our curtain of what's going on.
Yeah, there might be some of that where we're going like, gosh, I hope this thing cuts together. And I mean, it always does. It's just, I mean, especially when you have a director that you can trust. And I don't think I've had any thoughts of that, in recent ever with either of you. I've never thought, oh, geez, I hope there was a plan, because, there always seems like there is one. Absolutely.
Yeah.
While we're talking about humans, there are some accommodations that you might need. I'm talking like how sets are built, or what other equipment you might need, camera position, stuff like that. kind of more the technical thing that maybe people don't know about what's happening around when you're seeing a shot of something that's being shot for Sesame or for the Muppets. So, Ken, how do we accomplish putting humans with Muppets on Sesame Street, for example?
Yeah, well, Sesame has kind of two modes. One is if you're on their physical set, more than likely the human actor will have their feet on the actual floor.
Right.
Which means that everything has to go down. Everything has to work at a lower level for the puppeteers. So, and this is where, the blocking and movement gets really tricky. I used to describe it as, we're shooting icebergs with puppeteers. You know how what's above the water is the smallest thing to worry about.
Yep.
And the thing below the water will sink you. So,
and there are 7 of them right here.
Exactly. You're right. And
one person.
You want actor A to walk through the crowd and the puppets to part, and and there'll be no anything impeding them. There's all of that.
Yeah.
I don't know, like Mayhem or the Muppet Show or whatever. I'm assuming a lot of that was on a raised set. And sometimes Sesame, I'm assuming that, but Sesame will use raised sets for certain standalone pieces, or we'll turn part of Sesame set into a raised set so that we can achieve the movement that we need. And some of it's a cheat.
And
but in a raised set, you have to make bridges, platforms, and whatever, and they have to be safe for an actor to actually have their feet 3 feet in the air, to be on a deck that's 3 feet in the air so that puppeteers can get in tighter, puppeteers can perform standing up, that sort of thing. So
Matt, reveal the secret. How did we shoot Muppets Mayhem?
Yes, I think the one term is steel deck.
Yeah.
And that's the it's the most important feature on our set. It's what keeps all the grips in fine shape, because we have squares of steel deck that get pulled in and put down on every set. So every set is built 3 feet off the ground on steel deck, and everything is laid out. It's like a giant puzzle. And once we know, because we have, all of these shows had interactions between humans and the puppets, so it is all building the runways and areas, and figuring out the blocking to make it feel natural that the puppets can travel everywhere as the human travels, and again keeping the humans aware of where not to step.
Yes.
Trying to remember.
Or crew members too, because
I feel like we had more crew members that took
absolutely yes. I don't think our cast ever fell in a hole.
No,
but there are holes.
There are a lot of holes, and that's the one thing that everybody is told when they come on the set. Always look down. There's a lot of holes. But yeah, that's the biggest challenge, because it becomes almost like 3D directing. There is everything truly below the frame that you have to figure out and what works and where the movement works, and to make it still feel natural, and then to realize that you need these pathways for your actors to walk on, the humans, and to depending on your set, how to make it work so everybody can get to where they're going, and to make it feel as flawless as possible.
3-dimensional directing. That's it is
3D chess for sure.
And sometimes I feel like when the two, as a performer, it's always easier standing up It's always easier because I could literally walk into the frame, walk all the way over, walk deep in the back, come all the way forward. I can do that if I'm on the floor on Sesame Street, but I'm rolling around on a little rolly with special wheels on it, so it'll slide but not make any noise. And I can still do that, but now add 3 more Muppet Performers. If you're standing up, you can all pretty much almost move in and out, but within each other very easily. But on the floor, it becomes so much harder.
And if you're lucky enough to have a puppet that requires only one performer,
yes,
and then there's the cabling. There's all the cabling, so rolling gets limited too. You can't cross the cables.
Yep, all the cables for the monitors are there.
And then that's the thing. Another thing is how many different monitor stations do you have, and how many monitors? Because we had a lot of monitors, boy.
Yeah,
and everybody was moving.
Yep. So I need a monitor here, and now another 3 feet. I need another one, and then another 3 feet beyond that. If you want me to go all that way, I can do it, but I'm going to need 3 or 4 monitors.
Yeah.
Another thing about Sesame Street, Ken, is when you have not only puppets and a human actor who's usually a little taller than the puppets, but sometimes you'll have kids. And so that's not only you have like an actor then standing on the ground, you've got puppets on rolly or puppeteers on rollies. What do you do with the kids? How do you get them in? Just wires and lower them into the frame and take them right back up out? What do you do?
I wish.
Yeah. It'd be so much easier.
Very often, a 12 or 14-year-old kid will actually be shorter than the puppet because the puppeteer's arm and body below the frame, even if they're on the deck or close to the deck, end up being taller than that child. And then you've got to build bridges under them to raise them up. And then if they are too tall in comparison to the adult human in the scene, then you have to build them up too. So
yeah,
it's apple boxes. We have platforms, sometimes I think 3-inch platforms that are wider and longer, and we can, checkerboard those out. But again, once you start doing that, then you're forcing the puppeteers out wider. If that platform is wide, then the puppets can't get close. You want the puppets close to the human characters. It's a maze that you have to solve. But I have to say, having gone through this, then when you go to other productions that don't involve puppets, there's a certain freeing aspect to it, but it really makes you ask questions about every element in the scene for non-puppet scenes on other shows. It really raised my awareness for everything in a scene. How is this prop going to be used? How does this prop get there? How does that character get there? Do they have a clear path? All of this stuff translates in a good way for prep. And it's great training.
Yeah.
To go from the puppet world out into the real world.
So we're going to pick this conversation up next time, and we're going to continue talking about Directing Muppets with Ken Diego and Matt Sohn. So until then, we will see you below the frame. See you next time. Bye-bye. Below the Frame is a Welcome Matt production produced by me, Matt Vogel. The theme song was written by Stephanie DeBruzzo and myself and performed by my band, The Mighty Weaklings. Thanks to Dave Holteen at DaveHolteenDesign.com. He created our podcast art. You can follow me on Instagram at WelcomeMattV or search Matt Vogel. I post things every now and again, and it'll help you know when new episodes of this podcast, for example, are coming out. If you are sharing podcasts, please let somebody know about this one. And also, if you have a few seconds, just rate and review this one. I'm sure that pleases the podcast gods or something. You can find Below the Frame wherever you get your podcasts, and we are now a video podcast on YouTube, so you can see our faces if that's something that you want to do. Thanks everybody out there for listening. I am Matt Vogel, and we will see you next time when we go Below the Frame.
Go, go, go below the frame.